We also have to understand that the security industry is not a man carrying a baton. Those days are long since gone. One of the industries that has been affected by COVID-19 perhaps pretty heavily, especially on the employment side, is security. Because with the closure of many properties last year, for tourism workers, security was also affected because they didn't carry the full slate of security guards. So even when you think and consider with significantly reduced traffic at the airports, etc., and at many of your seaports, you have much less use for security. Then additionally, with reduced working times, we know that there's been some, I wouldn't call it a hemorrhage, but certainly a little bit of fallout in the security industry. Now, one of the things that's important to us is that as we look at our economic recovery, and as the Prime Minister has spoken to our intent on having a V-shaped recovery, this is one of the industries that we know is particularly important. The private security industry is without a doubt a critical pillar of national stability, both economic and because it contributes to the safety of Jamaicans. We look at Western Jamaica as being a part of that V-shaped economic recovery. And with that economic recovery, you're going to have greater need for the regulatory side of the security industry to be even stronger in Western Jamaica, because as your hotels are reopen, as you have new hotels being built, as you have general expansion in commerce, not just with the recovery to 2019 levels, but beyond, you're going to need a stronger security environment, and PSRA is a critical part of it.
Before we opened this regional office, we used to visit Montego Bay every 2 weeks, and then we had to move it to every week because we had persons who wanted us to come here to register, persons and companies. And so we would visit Montego Bay, rent facilities, or work out of FLA's office. We outgrew those spaces, hence the opening of the regional office. So it is a continuation of the work to increase our footprint, to ensure that we get persons to comply with the PSRA regulation. It is a little bit easier for the persons to move from here to do what we call our spot checks, in terms of trying to find illegal companies or even those that are compliant with the law, to visit them, to make them know we are here. We also do spot checks on the individual security guards just to make sure that they are compliant with the regulation.
The pandemic has hit the legal and the illegal security companies, and I wouldn't classify them quite as illegal, I'd classify them as unregulated. They're legally registered business. What they're not doing is complying with all of the regulations in the space. Now, our job at PSRA is to bring them in and to ensure that they function, because it's about standardization and ensuring that the industry itself is buoyant and healthy, but that when people see security guards, they can be assured of a particular minimum standard of delivery. Opening and increasing our footprint in the West has certainly increased our ability to regulate and monitor the space in Western Jamaica. But it's difficult to determine just how much of an impact we've had because of the fallout in employment in the sector, even though we're starting to see it come back, and we think it's coming back even faster than we had anticipated. We've certainly had incidents where private security guards come under attack. The legislative framework that governs the private security industry is inadequate. Like much of our legislation, and we're in a rush to kind of bring it into the 21st century, even if it's kicking and screaming, right? One of the issues that has affected the private security industry is that the private security industry interacts and is regulated at some level by 3 ministries. And if you think of how difficult it is, to manage regulation generally with one agency or one ministry managing an industry, in a space where the industry interacts heavily with the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Labour, and indeed the Ministry of National Security, that has created its own, I think, policy vacuum. That's an issue that we are indeed looking at, and we're looking to modernize the legislative framework that governs it. Now, we also have to understand that the security industry is not a man carrying a baton. Those days are long since gone. The issues that the security industry deal with are wide and diverse, and in many cases complex. You have data security professionals, you have IT security professionals, you have CPOs, you have all sorts of specialist needs in the industry. And we have to modernize the legislation and regulations so that PSRA indeed manages that industry properly. But as it stands now, PSRA monitors to make sure minimum standards are in place. The training level is one of the areas of concern to me personally, because the footprint of PSRA is too small to truly go into the field and check everybody's training level, and that is a concern. What we check is basic minimum standards. However, the minimum requirements on the law, I believe, are also weak. So even with the regulatory framework increasing, and the evidence of that is with the Western Office, we still need to now make sure that the legislation and the space gives us the room to indicate that people on the front line have to have particular training. It doesn't right now. Any modern country requires a level of safety and security to be buoyant and to grow and to realize prosperity. There is no country on earth that doesn't use some level of private security. My own view is that the level of skill and the level of technicality in the work in security will change over time, and I expect the labor force to stay the same, but I expect the level of skill and the level of training for our officers to train over time. PSRA to play a critical part in that, to ensure that the training that we do insist upon is indeed passed on to those who already benefit from it.